Quitting my job was maybe one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. I recognize that's a very privileged statement. Nonetheless, it was a huge decision for me because it afforded me stability and it afforded me a comfortable life. I had great benefits, and arguably this is what I had been working toward all through college. But I did make the decision to walk away from corporate, at least for 2-ish years. And this is everything that I battled with in my decision to quit my 6-figure tech job. Hi everyone, my name is Carly. On this channel, I talk about personal finance, my experiences in the modeling industry, and I also talk about living intentionally. If you're thinking about quitting your job, you may have some of the same fears that I did. My hope is that this video helps you think through some of the fears that you might have as you consider quitting your job. One of my biggest fears around quitting my job was taking a major pay cut. I was making good money at Microsoft. I was living comfortably in New York, and I managed my money well enough that I could save and invest the majority of my paychecks every month. I had always been a big saver and investor. I didn't necessarily save for anything in particular, but I saved to give myself as many options as possible for future me. So when I seriously started thinking about taking a sabbatical, I calculated my monthly expenses, and on the flip side of that, I added up my relatively liquid assets. This was mostly cash and stock. I took into consideration whether I would be mentally comfortable living off of this. With my current monthly expenses, I had about 1.5 to roughly 2 years worth of runway saved up. I really had to get over the mental block of spending this money that I had saved. Obviously, to many of us, spending money is much easier than making money. In the last 3 years, I had been in the mindset of saving really aggressively, so this was a complete shift to be spending money with potentially nothing or very little coming in for a period of time. I also have saved a decent amount into my retirement accounts, which I will not be touching until retirement, or unless it makes financial sense to, given some certain tax breaks. I'm also a single person who has no other major financial responsibilities. So if I really needed to, I could live extremely minimally for a little bit because I have done that before. I definitely thought twice about whether quitting was the right decision for me. Corporate is a path that many people take, at least the majority of the people around me. So I knew with some certainty what my life might look like and what my earning ceiling would be in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years into my career if I stayed on this path working for big tech. And sure, the earning ceiling for my position was decently high, but personally, I also knew how I felt logging onto work every day. It was really hard for me to focus on my work and create impact at my job because I didn't always connect with the work that I was doing. I figured if I could make a living building something of my own and my earning ceiling is unlimited, then why wouldn't I try to do that for myself? Many people also talk about the difficulties and frustrations they have at work during their non-work hours, myself included when I was working a job. I decided I didn't want to live a life where 8 hours of my day, I was not my most fulfilled. And even after those 8 hours, I felt the urge to spend my energy complaining about work or stressing about work. In that scenario, I was spending too much time thinking about work, and I felt like it wasn't fair to my friends or to myself if I constantly talked about work troubles without taking any action to solve them. And it's true that I could have interviewed for another job, but at that point I was working on 3 other personal projects / side hustles, and I felt like interviewing for another job would have eventually gotten me back to the same position as I was at that point. I'm not gonna lie, a good part of the reason why I chose to go into big tech after graduation was because of the prestige. The fact of the matter is, most people look at you differently when they realize that you work for certain companies. That's probably tied in part either to the lifestyle, the compensation, and or the exclusivity of getting a job at the company. There are certainly many merits to big tech. It's a great place to learn how to build systems. Career growth is quite well defined. Depending on the team you're placed in, there's also decent work-life balance. And there's an element of stability, though I guess that's debatable these days. But not to mention the amazing benefits like health insurance, various learning stipends, office perks, etc. A part of being able to take the plunge and quit my job was being okay with saying goodbye to the prestige. I realized that part of that is not placing so much emphasis on external validation and focusing instead on what I want to do that makes me happy. Part of what prestige brings is respect. I always knew entrepreneurs grinded and hustled, but I never truly understood the work it entailed until I was in it and I was doing the work. I now have so much respect for people who are working on their own projects, whether it be for YouTube or any other business venture. Succeeding is hard. For YouTube, getting enough traction to reach even 1,000 subscribers was monumental for me. It took nearly a year for me to get there, so I know how hard it is to grow. I realized that ultimately it's my life, it's my responsibility to live how I'd like to live. I can define prestige however I choose to, and that's that. Over the last year, I've also started to redefine what success means to me. When I was in college, I thought success meant trying to secure the highest paying job possible, being able to buy myself nice things and experiences, and basically having the means to consume more. That was pretty much what I was working toward, and I did achieve that. I could, within reason, pretty much buy myself whatever I wanted. Granted, there was a certain threshold for which the item would be an irresponsible purchase, but if I wanted to, theoretically, I could. Once I hit this level of income/net worth, I realized that with how I got there, I didn't have control over my time. Ultimately, that was making me really unhappy. That's how I realized I was trading my time for money. The more things I bought with this money, the more I realized that I was just trading my time for things. Most of the things I bought didn't really matter to me after a certain point. Because these things didn't really matter, I guess you could say by transitive property, I was just wasting my time working a job where I didn't always feel connected with what I was working on. I feel like that's a really weird and roundabout way to get there, but essentially that's how I felt. I felt like my youth could be much better spent building something for myself, even if I had to take a pay cut to do it for a couple of years. Now when I think of success, I think about what makes me happy. Am I living a life that I enjoy? If not, am I taking the steps toward living a life that would bring me joy? And if that's not the case, then what steps do I have to take to get me to that path? Eventually, I figured out that the path I was on while I was working my job wouldn't get me to my new definition of success. A shift in identity was a bit of a lesser fear, but quitting my job to be a model and content creator was a major shift in how everyone around me had known me. I studied computer science in college. For the longest time, I identified as someone who worked in tech. I think there was a bit of a fear that people would judge me for this shift in identity, but then I realized that I'm fully sending it and going after what I'm really excited about. Many people never have the courage to do that, or they're simply not able to, but I'm really proud of myself for going off of the beaten path. I've grown a lot since I've started this channel. I've gained a lot of confidence in myself over the years. The past 12 months in particular have been extremely pivotal. I also wouldn't have this if I wasn't pouring everything into building up this YouTube channel for myself. Loss of benefits was a huge consideration when I was debating quitting my job. Health insurance in particular was a huge factor. I was always under the impression that health insurance was extremely expensive, which it definitely is. Luckily, I was able to find a reasonable plan on the New York health marketplace. Most notably, I was also giving up a fitness stipend, I was giving up a retirement match, and a health savings account match, among a few other benefits. But at the end of the day, I just lumped this into the total compensation I was giving up. When I looked at it from that point of view, I realized even with this new total compensation, it was still worth it to me to walk away from my job and to try to make something of my own. I really had to put a value to the benefits, and that helped me more logically determine whether it was worth staying at my job, which honestly for a while it was worth it until at a certain point I decided it ultimately wasn't worth it. I think this is one of those situations where those benefits raise our standard of living and maybe keep us in a situation that doesn't serve us for longer than we should stay in. I feel like it's widely known that if we step away from corporate for a reason other than higher education, we often end up making less money in the long term when we go back. I was concerned that if I ultimately decided to go back to corporate, I would have lost out on the years of compensation and the experience that would have propelled me to a more senior position a few years down the line. But just like how people opt to get an MBA to learn about being an entrepreneur or even to be an entrepreneur, I figured that I am actively working on my businesses. This is my MBA experience. I'm getting firsthand experience on building a personal brand. I'm using data and analytics to inform myself on which topics to expand upon for my audience. I'm learning how to scale my business. I'm learning how to price my services and negotiate deals. I knew I would learn some of these skills, but other aspects I didn't realize I would learn until I started working on this full time. Not to mention, I'm learning by doing, which has always helped me learn faster as compared to more theoretical classwork. And I get to do this while making money instead of spending all in, I don't know, 100,000 to maybe 150,000 for an MBA degree. I guess that's a win for me. Overall, I had to give myself a shot at living a life that would make me happy. The way I know how to do that right now is building my own business on YouTube. Maybe a few months or years down the line, this no longer brings me the joy it used to. That's always a possibility, and if I reach that point, then I'll just pivot again. My life motto is just to live a good and happy life, and I guess I just have to continuously reevaluate to see if I am continuing to make myself happy. I get that quitting a job is not always accessible to people, especially if they have to take care of a family or have bills or a mortgage to pay. There's a huge element of privilege that allowed me to quit. I also took a lot of action to give myself this time too. I planned my finances and I made sure I had something to work on. But if you think you might want to quit your job in the future at some point, start saving money. It's so important to have that safety blanket. Even if you don't quit, you now have a sum of money that you can fall back on in case anything unexpected happens. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and comment down below which fear you relate to. If you're considering quitting your job, you should check out this video where I talk about everything you should do before you give your manager your 2-week notice.